Hello, welcome back to Heather Rants. We don't really rant, but when people don't like what you have to say, they think it makes you sound like you're the unhinged one if they call it ranting. In today's topic, we're going to be expanding the conversation around Norway versus the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, to backtrack a little bit, the Jehovah's Witnesses have sued Norway to try and get government subsidies and free money back. Norway took the government subsidies and free money away from the Jehovah's Witnesses because they took away their religious entity status. And they did that because they violate human and children's rights by virtue of disfellowshipping, which is psychological torture. Now, the part of the topic that I want to get into today, though, is one that I don't remember being brought up in listening to that court hearing or in any of the discussions yet. But it's also a topic that you'd be hard-pressed to come across substantiated studies on, because it would be unethical to produce this kind of environment to document in a clinically controlled setting. It would be unethical. But if the Jehovah's Witnesses want to be the canary in the coal mine to human rights, you can be the study subject. Congratulations. Anywho, I tried to do the research on this topic also, but the information that I was able to find was extremely limited. It is behind a paywall / licensure requirement to view these studies. The closest thing I got to it was the introduction that said that the sudden loss, the sudden ostracism of a beloved family member, or, fallout from the family, could be a pretty good predictor that, your child is going to end up in juvenile delinquency or drug use. But I couldn't read the study because it's behind a paywall / licensure requirement. I found like 3 of them and I couldn't get into any of them, but that one had an intro. But here's the thing. The Jehovah's Witnesses baptize children. They could be prepubescent. They haven't gone through, puberty. They haven't gone through developmental stages that would include developmentally appropriate defiance and misbehavior. And these kids get disfellowshipped. They get disfellowshipped for being appropriately curious about theirs and others' bodies. But the part that they forgot to mention is that these children are also very likely to lose beloved family members suddenly. Very close beloved family members. If they're lucky, they won't be disfellowshipped as 17, 18, 19-year-old, essentially kids, but legal adults. And if they're extremely lucky, they won't experience the disfellowshipping of a beloved family member that, they look up to, they are excited to see, Aunt whoever, oh my God, I'm so excited to see you, I'm happy. Like, somebody who might have been a direct caregiver on a pretty regular basis. And by not losing those beloved family members and friends, they are able to develop secure attachment styles and trust and security, emotional security. But what happens to the child that, this is a beloved family member, they squeal with delight when they see their aunt or their uncle appear, or grandma or grandpa. Maybe grandma or grandpa were even like babysitters for them, and one day they're disfellowshipped and their parents are trying to explain to them, like, we can't talk to them anymore because we have to be good to Jehovah. Like, how does this impact children? To, like, out of nowhere, the person that they used to squeal with the light to see, never harmed a hair on their head, these are freaking phenomenal people, and enrich these children's lives. Suddenly, out of nowhere, they're wicked, they're evil, they're awful, they're like, run from them in the store. Oh no, you're a bad person now. Just out of nowhere. How would that not cause some sort of emotional development issue or some sort of trust issue? What does that do to a child's brain when a beloved person is suddenly terrible, or they're suddenly just not allowed to see them anymore and they're distraught? Like, what kind, like, I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, having a little kid, somebody who's old enough to realize that their person is missing or gone, or suddenly their person is bad, and whatever the parents have to tell them to make it right or okay or whatever, like, what does this do to a kid? And then, if they're even luckier, out of nowhere, miraculously, suddenly, one day, they go to a meeting and mom and dad are like, go hug them. Go tell them I'm glad to have you back. Go tell them. And they're like, what? What? First they were good, then they were bad, and now they're... Like, what does this do to a child? And what does it do to their perception of what could be good or bad? What does this do if somebody happens to be an abuser and, somebody who never harmed a hair on their head is wicked and bad, and they're going to cause them to die in Armageddon and all this stuff? And then what no, they didn't even ever harm hair on their head. Looked up to them for everything. Now all of a sudden they're bad. And then they come up with somebody who's going to, somehow abuse them. What happens when they run into an abuser? And their parents are telling them this person is good or bad or indifferent. But, because this is in, God's organization and you're supposed to trust each other implicitly and have, good Christian love, and this is how you know each other and all this bull crap. This person's good. The person who never harmed a hair on your head and you were, delighted and gleeful to see is wicked. This person who touches you inappropriately and may be a bad guy, is a bad guy. Who are we wrong? This person... it's good because they haven't been caught, and or they haven't been deemed unrepentant by a bunch of bricklayers in a back room, window washers. Somebody who emotionally harms them or gaslights or verbally abuses them or manipulates them by virtue of, you can't do that, you'll upset Jehovah, you have to give me a hug, or Jehovah's not going to be happy with you. See this wicked person that never harmed a hair on your head? Jehovah's not happy with them. Jehovah's happy with me. What does this do to a kid? Can in my personal experience, my twin sister kind of fell off the edge when I got disfellowshipped. She was distraught. She was upset. That was the end of the religion for her. I'm sure that's not what the Jehovah's Witnesses wanted. But she was the goody little two-shoes of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and she fell off the edge. Because we were very, very, very young adults when I got disfellowshipped. We hadn't even been legal for 6 months yet. my little cousins were distraught. I'm sorry, I just kind of get emotional thinking about it because I lost my relationship with them. Like we were like good cousins. Like we were your typical cousins. Like these are your first best friends. It's like life suddenly didn't make sense at that point, basically, what I heard. At a much later point in time when we were all adults and they were all out and that kind of thing. Like life suddenly didn't make sense. It suddenly wasn't fair. It was suddenly just like a mind fuck, essentially. Because just out of nowhere, they weren't allowed to talk to me. I'm much older than them. Like, I'm 5, 6, 7 years older than them. That messed them up. They did end up falling into the introduction to that study where they were juvenile delinquents and drug users. My sisters both developed drinking problems. You can't tell me this doesn't have an impact on children that's destructive to their development and to their secure emotional attachment styles. You can't tell me this doesn't have ramifications. But like I said, this is a study that can't be done for the simple fact that to produce this level of trauma intentionally would be unethical. You're not going to find a modern study, because what they did to establish, the importance of attachment back in the 50s was using animals, and that was seen as like wildly abusive. That would never happen now. It's outrageous now. The only way they're going to get to study the impact is to go after religion. Like, it's pretty well studied, like, what happens with drugs. But we're not talking about drugs and, like, losing a family member suddenly to that. We're talking about, this is a good person in my life. This is somebody I look up to, and all this stuff that was all over good. And suddenly they're not. Just out of nowhere, suddenly they're not. We're not talking about, oh, Uncle Jimmy has like a problem and we love him, but he makes decisions that aren't safe, so we have to be careful. This is out of nowhere. You're never allowed to see this wonderful human being anywhere ever again, or talk to them, or whatever. Just done. Period. Ghosted. I think we need to add this to the conversation. Do your own videos. Tell me what you think. See if you can find studies. Maybe you'll have better success than I did. Because a lot of the studies involve being ostracized from a parent, which is also devastating to children. But it's difficult to find that finite, kind of almost niche scenario. And I say it's niche because it doesn't typically happen. People typically enjoy having a supportive role from, family, friends, and peers to be involved with their children. Typically, people don't bar good people from their children's lives. even if they don't agree with everything that they do in life. It's not something that happens all that often, but you know, whatever. You guys, tell me what you think. Bring up videos, do some studies, talk about it. Like, I think it's something that we need to add to the conversation. So I'll talk to you later.